Welcome everyone to another Enerative Office Hours. We'll let people trickle in. I know people are joining now, and there's that uh, 2-minute wait that every webinar presentation has to do. But as people join, I want to encourage you to introduce yourself, introduce what type of portfolio you're coming from, what asset class, and how big it is. That'll help guide our conversation today and tailor it a little to our audience. For those of you who have never joined an Enerative Office Hours before, it's like a webinar, except more engaging, more interactive. As you have questions, or if you want to chat, drop it in the chat on your right there, and we'll respond to it live. We don't have to do a Q&A at the end. We'll just kind of have this be free flowing. And for those of you who cannot join at this time, we will be recording this and we will send out the recording afterwards. So thank you all for joining. Thank you all for introducing yourself, and we'll get started in maybe 30 seconds here. All right. So today, this Enerative Office Hours is about how to fix the capital planning process. I'm Comley. I host these Enerative Office Hours, and I want to introduce my co-host for today, Ryan Sandberg. Ryan, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everybody. Thank you, Comley, for that introduction. Happy to be here. I've helped facilitate and work on our new capital planning module, which is coming to fruition. I'm very happy to see its progress. I'm the head of product for Enerative, and I've been here since January, but I've been in product management for about 15 years and worked quite a while in automotive industry, and then switched over to commercial and industrial real estate, and joined Enerative back in January, and happy to be here. And we're kicking out some pretty great products.
Cool. Thanks for that, Ryan. All right, let's dive in. Okay, so we're going to Tarantino this a bit. We're going to start at the end, vision, goal, ideal, kind of Holy Grail situation, and then we'll work backwards to see how we could potentially get there. So in this scenario, I want to talk about offering memorandums. When you're looking to buy and sell a property, everybody's seen these offering memorandums in the beginning. It talks about, the demographics and the location and the occupancy rates and the anchor tenants and all that critical information. Towards the back, it talks about things like capital reserves and, what replacements are going to be necessary going forward so that you can properly underwrite the property and put together your pro forma. The thing is that buyers are sophisticated. They've seen this over and over again. They know that the capital reserves that are being put out there and the capital plan that's in place is not perfect, right? Nothing's perfect. And a capital expenditure that's unexpected is, in many buyers' minds, the number one biggest risk in buying a property. So they'll take their sales price and they'll apply a risk discount, right? Like they don't know that the boiler or the chiller or the rooftop units or any of the critical equipment or infrastructure in the building is not going to fail and need to be replaced right away. So they take a little off the top. What we want to do, what our vision and goal is to eliminate that risk discount, to provide the buyers with so much information, so much confidence in the capital reserve section of your offering memorandum that they can eliminate that, which would increase the asset value and the sales price by hundreds of thousands, potentially millions of dollars. So how do we get there? Obviously, that's an ambitious goal. We're not there yet. The market's not there yet. The industry's not there yet. But sophisticated owners and operators are thinking about this today so that they're ready for that tomorrow. But to get to that endpoint, let's start at the beginning. I took this little diagram from CBRE. This is, in their minds, the typical capital planning approach. It looks pretty comprehensive, pretty straightforward and systematized, right? You set your goals and objectives. This year, a lot of portfolios from the top are saying, hey, cost of capital is increasing. We want you to defer capital costs whenever possible. You have your kind of portfolio inventory. You make your capital plan. It gets approved. You execute on the projects and you report back. Sounds great, right? In reality, things play out very, very differently almost every time. So what's actually happening is we're looking at a property condition report. Maybe this was done recently. Maybe this was done, 5 years ago. We're digging into that. We're pulling out kind of those long-term cost opinions that they put in there, and we're putting those into spreadsheets, right? And we have our kind of forecast and our budget each year for what we're going to need to replace, what we're going to need to modernize, where we're going to need to spend money. But as we go through budgeting season, I know a lot of you are in the midst of budgeting season right now. All this information about, why we've deferred previous capital investments, why we're, doing this particular repair or taking on this particular expense this year, all of that is all over the place. You have to dig through emails, you have PDFs, maybe you have a shared drive. A lot of it is just stored in the memory of the on-site teams, right? So this becomes an arduous process that I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with, and we've heard this over and over again. I actually was speaking with an operations manager recently who said if he were an asset manager, he wouldn't trust anything that's put in front of him. He knows that he just doesn't have the data, and a lot of this is just guesswork. So let's diagnose kind of where this capital planning process is failing us. And then we can step by step figure out how to improve that. So first of all, obviously it's time consuming. When you need to go digging for information, when it's not at your fingertips, that's time spent non-productively when it could be spent elsewhere. Everyone is crammed during budgeting season as it is. Having information all over the place doesn't help at all. It's also based off insufficient data, right? We're looking at long-term cost opinions from a snapshot in time from years ago, right? There's a lot more that's happened with the building that humans can't remember all the time, and that are not captured in property condition assessments. This process also doesn't take ESG into account. A lot of portfolios are under pressure, not just to get ESG scores, but to do something about it and to improve those scores. What that often looks like is kind of getting an energy audit done, which lives in a completely different place than the standard capital plan. This, for ESG to be successful, it should be infused into the normal workflows and processes that are taking place day in and day out. And then finally, it's siloed to individual properties. There's actually a lot of value in seeing the capital plans rolled up into a portfolio view. We'll talk about that later. But here are from our seat, the primary issues with kind of the status quo in the capital planning process. So let's talk about one by one how to address these and how to set ourselves up for that vision where we're increasing our asset value by hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. First of all, we want to digitize everything. So that equipment inventory, if it lives in a spreadsheet, it's inevitably not going to be updated. It also is not tied at all to any relevant documentation, which necessarily has to live elsewhere. So we want to have a really, really solid base where everything we do is living in software. The cool thing from there is that we can bring our capital plans out of these spreadsheets and bring them into software as well. That gets rid of versioning issues. It allows us to do things like track when changes have been made. And we can also add the supporting documentation directly into the software. So now, there's no more looking for information. Whether you're brand new to the building or from a different team, you can jump in, you can see, what evaluations have been done, what decisions have been made, and why, what the kind of summaries are. So first step, digitize everything, save time, right? That was that first piece. The second piece is data-driven decision-making. So instead of a snapshot in time from years ago, there is so much data being generated from most properties. That's from work orders, from inspections, from vendors performing preventative maintenance. All of this gives us a very, very clear picture of the condition of equipment that's much more real time, right? We shouldn't be basing decisions off how things looked a while ago. We should be basing them how they looked yesterday or today, right? So, if a piece of equipment is consistently having inspections failed, that's going to influence our capital plans, right? Likewise, if equipment is passing its inspections and it has, verified preventative maintenance performed on a regular basis, that allows us to defer capital investments and save that money today.
Comley, just to build on that just real quickly, right? So we talked a little bit about how you plan depending on today's dollars or past dollars. Another piece of that is planning in future dollars. So we've included a concept within it called escalations. And escalations is this term used to talk about something like, we're all familiar with inflation right now. We're all dealing with inflation. How do you adjust your decisions based upon inflation and what it might be in 2 years or 3 years? Cost of labor, cost of supplies and materials, all that can be factored in within our tool. And so you can have a current price of how you're planning out of current costs, and then also what it could be in the future. So maybe because of escalations are too high, maybe now is the time to do that because of what could happen in the future. So another tidbit of good information that helps in decision making.
Yeah, time value of money for sure. So we talked about kind of work orders and inspections. This is valuable data that's being generated from workflows, kind of the activity of the on-site staff and the operators and the maintenance vendors. There's also a ton of valuable data that we can get from real-time monitoring, specifically runtime hours. So the idea here is, it's like saying, I'm going to buy a new car every 10 years versus I'm going to buy a new car every 200,000 miles, right? Nobody says, replace your car because you've had it for 10 years. If you haven't driven it that much, you don't need to replace it. We can bring the same concept to capital planning and equipment replacements because we can calculate not only average runtime hours, but cumulative runtime hours for every piece of equipment. So you can base these capital plans on actually how much you use the equipment rather than a manufacturer's estimated expected useful life. Cool. All right. So the last section, data-driven decision-making. If equipment's going to cause us more trouble than it's worth, let's replace it now. If we can defer those, let's do it. But at some point, we are going to have to make those replacement decisions. And there's a really critical concept floating around commercial real estate right now, and that's committed emissions, right? So there's a lot that can be done to reduce carbon emissions by optimizing how you run equipment, right? You want to have very tight schedules and set points, and you want to be dynamic to occupancy and things like air quality. But the actual equipment that's running itself, if you do a like for like replacement with the old model that you've had for the last 20 years, you've committed that building to a certain amount of emissions, right? We want to, in every decision that we make, take into account our portfolio's long-term sustainability goals. So the first thing we need there is to actually have the data, right? To understand over its lifetime, what is the environmental impact? What are the carbon emissions for this particular piece of equipment? And then we can compare that to other makes and models out there on the market based off, again, real-time data, not just manufacturers' assumptions or spec sheets. And we can infuse that every equipment replacement decision with this energy data. It's really, really powerful. The other thing we can do is with real-time data, there are a ton of analytics and insights that can be run. Some of these insights will include, hey, the data indicates that installing, for example, variable frequency drives would save you a bunch of money, $26,000, $27,000 a year to install these things. But just like we talked about before, where energy audits shouldn't live kind of parallel to and separate from normal capital planning, these insights, when everything's digitized and everything's connected, can flow directly into the standard capital plan, right? So you can decide, okay, we want to make these upgrades. We know it'll save money, but we have to look at our budgets year in, year out, decide where it makes the most sense from a budget perspective, and push it directly into the capital plan from there, right? Then we can add it to our budget, have it be approved, and have a much more seamless process so that, again, ESG is infused into the normal process. And then the last step is we want to roll all this data up to the portfolio. So what we see all the time is, a portfolio will realize, oh my God, we're actually purchasing 40 rooftop units this year. Why are 40 different properties each buying one, right? The portfolio should buy 40 in bulk and save a bunch of money there. Multifamily portfolios, they might be buying 6,000 refrigerators this year. Like, there's no other way to see this data if it all lives in spreadsheets. So this kind of gives you this portfolio level view where you can understand, what you're buying, where you're buying it, what you're replacing, like where you're spending your money on. Hopefully you're not spending the money on equipment that's in excellent condition, right? We want to be focused on those poorly performing pieces of equipment. And then you can make those bulk purchases and negotiate some premium supplier discounts.
Perfect. No, I think you said it really well, Conley. Part of the development and discovery process that we go through in building products, we interview our clients and prospects to figure out what needs to be done. And one of the things that kept coming up is, how do I know across my portfolio how many replacements of a specific piece of equipment? It's really hard to know when everybody's just submitting spreadsheets and they're approving spreadsheets to really aggregate it, and then you can see it and have it charted out. Once you have it charted out and visualized, then you can know, okay, just like I said, let's buy bulk here. Let's not buy one-offs. Let's not do it that way. Or, man, do we really need to go in and have all these expenditures because of something that's going on, right? This gets really powerful in terms of decision making. We can roll it across all of your portfolio and see each property and see some of those kind of infrequency types of equipment that need to be replaced.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's really not a complicated exercise once you have the data, right? The challenge is that the data to make these types of better decisions just isn't available. Once it is, it's really not complicated to save a bunch of money there. Cool. So now let's bring it back to the beginning. Imagine packaging all that up for a prospective buyer, right? You could very, very in a compelling fashion, argue that the offering memorandum that you're showing has lower risk. Here's why. We have tracked the real-time equipment condition for years. We know exactly how many runtime hours every piece of equipment has. This chiller is not going to blow up on you the moment you buy the building, and here's why, right? 2, you are saying to them, I'm not locking you into high emissions for the long term, right? Now, you might misoperate your building. You might run everything 24/7 and just be a poor operator, but at least the equipment that you're running on has been vetted for efficiency. It has been benchmarked against thousands of other pieces of equipment to make sure that what we have in place, what we bought before you bought our building from us, is efficient, it's optimal, and setting you up for ESG success. So in summary, digitization plus data-driven decision-making plus infusing ESG into the normal decision-making process, that's how we get higher value. That's how we fix the capital planning process. Cool. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. If there are any questions, feel free to shout them out. Otherwise, we will wrap it up. We will be sending out the slides and a recording to this later tonight, and we really, really appreciate your time. Thanks, everyone. Have a good day.